As the chained elephant longs for the wilds of the jungles, so Prince Siddhartha grew bored with the opulence and grandeur of royal entertainments. He yearned to see the world beyond the palace walls, a realm untouched by his father's sovereignty. King Suddhodana, sensing his son's growing restlessness, granted him this wish, albeit with conditions. A jewel-fronted chariot was prepared, and the roads along which the prince would travel were ordered to be adorned, swept clean of any signs of suffering or decay, the old, the sick, the dead, and the holy men. Yet, the celestial beings, watching from above, had other plans for Siddhartha. They knew his destiny was not to be shielded from the truths of the world, but to be confronted by them. The city, unaware of the king's decree, was aflutter with excitement. Houses were festooned with colorful curtains and banners, and the streets lined with spectators eager to catch a glimpse of their future king. Thus, Siddhartha, accompanied by his faithful charioteer Channa, rode through the bustling streets of the city and into the countryside, a tapestry of greenery watered by meandering rivulets. As Siddhartha and Channa journeyed further, the prince's once sheltered life began to unravel, thread by thread. The first encounter with the old man had already planted seeds of profound sadness in Siddhartha's heart. The realization that youth, with all its vigor and beauty, was but a temporary state, inevitably giving way to the decrepitude of age, was unsettling. The old man's bent frame, his face etched with the tales of time, and his weary eyes, were stark reminders of the relentless march of time that spared no one, not even a prince. As they moved on, the vibrant energy of the city seemed like a distant memory. Another figure soon appeared, presenting a harsh contrast to the previous scene. This time, it was a sick man, his body twisted in pain, each breath a struggle, his skin pallid and clammy. Siddhartha, with a heart still heavy from the first encounter, turned to Channa for answers. The charioteer, his voice tinged with solemnity, explained that sickness was an indiscriminate visitor, a universal plight that afflicted every being, regardless of their status or wisdom. This revelation pierced Siddhartha's heart, deepening his disillusionment with the fleeting nature of worldly pleasures and the false sense of security they provided. The prince began to understand the fragility of human life, the thin line that separated health from illness, joy from despair. Their journey, already shadowed by revelations, took an even darker turn when they stumbled upon a funeral procession. The air was heavy with grief, the mourners' faces etched with loss and despair. The sight of the lifeless body, once a vessel of life and now so still and cold, was a grim testament to the finality of existence. Siddhartha, shaken to his core, sought understanding from Channa once more. The charioteer's words, that death was the inevitable destiny of all life, echoed in Siddhartha's mind like a somber bell. This encounter with death, so raw and unequivocal, left him reeling with a profound sense of futility. The inescapable reality of death, the ultimate end that awaited every living being, loomed large over him, casting a shadow on his soul. These encounters, with aging, sickness, and death, profoundly transformed Siddhartha. The palace walls, which had once seemed to offer protection and pleasure, now felt like a fragile shield against the inexorable truths of existence. The laughter and music of the palace, which once filled his heart with joy, now rang hollow. Siddhartha's spirit, once buoyed by youthful exuberance and royal privilege, was now adrift in a sea of existential questions. The realization that life, in all its beauty and brutality, was a transient journey marked by suffering and impermanence, was a turning point in his life. This journey outside the palace walls, intended to be a simple excursion, had become a pilgrimage into the deeper realms of human existence. Siddhartha's eyes had been opened to the realities of life, realities from which he had been shielded but which now consumed his thoughts and stirred his soul. This was the beginning of a profound transformation, the first steps on the path that would eventually lead him to enlightenment, to become the Buddha. But at that moment, as he returned to the palace, Siddhartha was a prince whose world had irrevocably changed, whose heart was heavy with newfound knowledge and whose mind was ablaze with questions that demanded answers. Upon returning to the palace, the prince was a changed man. The riches and luxuries that once symbolized his royal heritage now seemed trivial, even burdensome. His wife, noticing his somber demeanor, implored him to share his thoughts. Siddhartha spoke of his revelations, of the impermanence and suffering he had witnessed. He spoke of old age, sickness, and death, the inescapable truths that had stripped away his desire for worldly pleasures. King Suddhodana, hearing of his son's transformation, was deeply troubled. He had hoped to shield Siddhartha from the harsh realities of life, to prepare him for a future as a great king. Instead, he saw a son who had become estranged from the very life he was born into, a prince who had glimpsed the truth behind the veil of royal privilege. Siddhartha's experiences outside the palace walls ignited a profound inner turmoil. He began to question the very foundations of his existence, the meaning of life amidst so much suffering. The palace, once a symbol of his future, now felt like a gilded cage, trapping him in a life devoid of true understanding and compassion. Night after night, Siddhartha lay awake, pondering the nature of existence, the cycle of life and death. The luxuries of his royal life, the laughter and music of the palace, no longer brought him any joy. Instead, they echoed with the hollow ring of impermanence. His heart heavy with existential sorrow, Siddhartha began to conceive a desire for a deeper understanding, a longing to find a path that led beyond the fleeting joys and inevitable sufferings of worldly existence. He sought a truth that lay beyond the palatial walls, a truth that could explain the cycle of life, suffering, and death.